Good morning, Dr. Govind Raj. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir. Good morning, sir. Very, very, very good morning.
Yeah, good morning. This is Dr. Vinod Sajdev, the Director PG Studies of ITS Dental College. And I would like to, at the outset, thank you for sparing your valuable time in imparting new.
Hello.
Hello.
Yeah. Is there
So
any
I
problem?
think we are not able to hear, sir. Yes, sir.
No, no, I can hear you, Saurabh. Sirs का कुछ कट हो
Okay,
गया.
we are not able to.
Can I can I start, Saurabh?
Just a second, sir.
Yeah.
Uh, I would also request our principal, sir, to kindly welcome the guest speaker, sir.
Hello, good morning. Can you hear me?
Yeah. Good morning, Devicharan, sir.
How are you, doctor?
I'm fine, sir. Even our principal is your junior, sir, Dr. Ganta Sunil from AV Shetty. He has conveyed his warm regards to you.
He's an orthodontist?
Yeah, yeah, orthodontist. Your wife is also orthodontist, so he was conveying his
Very
regards.
nice. Dr. Sunil. Yeah.
Yeah, Ganta Sunil from AV Shetty, sir.
Yeah. Very nice, very nice. I'm so grateful to you for being a part of this program today.
Yeah, sir, it's my pleasure. You have given me the opportunity to share the knowledge and also the expertise of me. It's a kind pleasure from your side also. I want to thank your management, the principal, of course, yourself and the director, PG director, and Saurabh doing the excellent job, being in touch with me continuously. Thank you, Saurabh, doing this excellent job.
Thank you, sir.
And thank you very much.
It's my privilege to introduce our guest speaker of the day, Dr. N. Govind Rajkumar, sir. Sir is a renowned speaker in the field of oral pathology, and he has been a guest speaker in various national and international conferences. Sir is currently the principal professor and head of the Department of Oral Pathology at GSL Dental College, Rajmundry, Andhra Pradesh. Sir is a life member and EC member of IUMP, and he has numerous national and international publications in various index journals. Sir has also been part of a high-power committee for medical, dental, nursing, and paramedical for Government of Andhra Pradesh previously. He has also been part of the PhD registration committee and a member of Rajiv Gandhi Health University, Karnataka. He is also on board of many national and international journals as a reviewer. Sir, it is my honor to welcome you for today's much-awaited scientific session, sir.
Thank you, Saurabh.
We are all eagerly waiting to listen to you, sir.
Yeah, it's my pleasure, Saurabh. Thank you for the nice introduction. A very good morning to one and all the 180 or 190 students, the BDS students, postgraduates, as well as the faculty members who are in the online now. A very warm good morning to ITS Ghaziabad. And this is the college from GSL Rajamundry where we are right now. This is greeting from my college to all ITC Ghaziabad students. As you all know, the first step towards cure is to know what the disease is. I think all of you will accept it. And I'll be glad if it will be a little bit of interaction section rather than a didactic one. If anybody can stop me in between, no hurdles at all. And when I ask you something, anyone can just answer it, not in a random as such, but anyone can answer. Of course, here we are all learning, so mistakes can be done, no problem, no issues at all. So be active, that is what I want me to say. So the first step towards cure is to know what the disease is. I think all of you will accept that. And oral pathology is no exception. So you don't get answers unless you look for it or ask for it. So what is the clinical diagnosis? Basically, why you need to do the clinical diagnosis? The problem what I have seen with the most of the undergraduate students is that when a student enters into a third year or something, the professors, the assistant professors try to show them something. So this is a 9 o'clock position. You can see some lesion over there. But most often what happens is they have never seen that and their brain doesn't knows it. So their eyes cannot appreciate. Just because of scarcity, they will say, yeah, I can see that, sir. I can understand, sir. Yes, sir. But problem is most of the times they will not understand because the brain doesn't know what they are showing is. So most of the times this happens, which I have observed in my experience. For that, why that happens? Because most of the times they are not very much aware of normal things first. You cannot appreciate the abnormal things without knowing the normal things. The first thing is know the normal. That means your basic should be good. That means your anatomy, physiology, biochemistry, and pathology. Unless they are good, it is very difficult for you to understand the oral pathology, the lesion as such, because without knowing the normal, you cannot appreciate the abnormal. So the final outcome for any clinical diagnosis should have a good treatment plan. So for that, it is very important that we should battery no plugging చేయలా పోయింది.
Saurabh,
Yes, sir.
something has gone wrong.
Yes, sir. I think some charging issue, sir, with sir. I'll call him,
Okay,
sir.
कोई बात नहीं.
Sir is coming back online. There was some power issues. Yes, I can see you, sir, now.
Yeah, I'm coming.
Yes. Uh,
And this is the other thing which I'm quite common, oftenly seeing with the fresh graduated tutors as well as the assistant professors and what. The problem is that they come out with a good knowledge, a fresh knowledge, and rather telling what is important to the patient, they'll be telling extraordinarily to show their knowledge, what they have gained in this due course of education. So this is a good example of that. You can see in that picture very clearly precision and significance. The other precision is they want to tell what exactly the disease is, which is not required for the patient. So they try to explain the pathophysiology. They try to explain this is what. The simple thing is just look out. That is what is important. Rather explaining a 1500 kgs mass is approaching your head at 45.3 meters speed. That is not necessary. But most often when we passed out in a starting stage, the assistant professors and tutors try to teach the students extraordinarily beyond their limit, which is not necessary. First, they should be taught what is the precise significance of the clinical cases. With this introduction, I want to come to today's topic, the clinico-pathological correlation and insight to oral lesions. So why, what, and how in oral pathology? So if you see oral pathology, there are only 4 things, if not only 3: the reactive lesions, inflammatory lesions, neoplastic lesions, and cystic lesions. So if you get a pathology in the oral cavity, they have to be in either of these 4. Either they have to be reactive, either they have to be inflammatory, or they have to be neoplastic or cystic. What else you can get? You don't get any cardiac diseases in the oral cavity. You don't get a renal disease in your cavity. Of course, they can show some clinical features of systemic diseases in the oral cavity. They say mouth is a mirror of the cavity. But as such, majority of our pathology is from either reactive, inflammatory, neoplastic, or cystic. Now, looking at this, can anybody tell me what do you think of it? Anybody can answer that, no issues. I said it's an interaction.
They are on mute, sir, because if they put their mics on, then it's lots of interference. So we have told them to ask the question through chat, sir.
Chat, okay. Okay,
Yes.
through chat you can send me what it is. I can tell that I can know that what you're feeling inside exactly. Through chat you can do that. You can send me the chat. So what is that is you can see a white lesion over that. The question here is, everybody knows that is a white lesion, but the question here is why the white lesions are white. Can anybody know why the white lesions are white? This is a common question which everybody will ask, why the white lesions are white. And most of you will tell that because of keratin. I know that most of you will tell that because of keratin. If that is so, our skin has got keratin, but all skins are not white. Everything has got keratin. Your hair has got keratin, but that is not white. But the thing which you have seen in the screen right now is white in color. What could be the reason behind it? The answer is simple. The keratin is the answer, but it is not the, this is not the, what you say, a good keratin. It is an abnormal keratin. It is an abnormal keratin. So abnormal keratin has got increased absorption of water. Also the light spectrum of hydration is different. That's why it absorbs. A good example of this is you put your hand in your water for long period of time. You get a wrinkles and the whole hand will become white in color. The same way, this is due to not a normal keratin. It is an abnormal keratin, because in leukoplakia or any white lesions, there is abnormal proliferation of the basal cells and finally they become keratin. That keratin is abnormal keratin. That's why the white lesions appear white in color. And this is a common problem. A female patient, age 15, complains of burning sensation of her tongue from past 6 months. And she has visited a local dentist. She was advised multivitamin supplements, but her symptoms didn't vanish. And I want to know what is your diagnosis on this. What is your diagnosis? What are you thinking? Why the patient has got a burning sensation? A 50 years old female patient, burning sensation, visited many dental clinics, finally came to your dental clinic asking for the solution. So what do you think of it? Very simple. Most common thing. 50 years female. That means she is nearing to the menopause. That means she has got over or excess bleeding chances. So the first thing when the patient, a female patient above 45 enters into your clinic, says burning sensation, first think about anemia. Because during anemia, what is the relationship between anemia and burning sensation? When you have anemia, the epithelium will become atrophic because epithelium is avascular. It has to depend on the vascularity or the nutrition from underlying connective tissue. So basically what happens, the epithelium undergoes atrophy because of lack of nutrition. So because of that, the patient develops burning sensation. So the burning sensation, women in particular, above 40, 45, first please do ask about anemia. Simple thing, rather than going in around many other things. You should all aware of this common problem in your clinical practice and day-to-day examination in your undergraduate and postgraduate levels. You can see a picture here, a very beautiful one. And what is the thing which strikes to your things? The interdental papilla is all swollen and the interdental papilla is showing necrotic features. It is swollen and you can see very clearly it is interdental papilla. It is all swollen and it is becoming necrotic. So what lesion it is? Necrotic interdental papilla punched out. Etiology is smoking in most of the times. Chronic smokers do get this. Stress is the etiological factors for this sometimes. Yeah, I think most of you would have got the answer. It is ANAG. NUG, or you call it acute necrotizing ulcerative gingivitis. But the question here is, what is the relationship between the smoking and ANAG? Why do people develop ANAG if they smoke? Because when the patient starts smoking continuously or chronic smokers, when you smoke in the body, there will be release of adrenaline. Adrenaline is a powerful peripheral vasoconstrictor and central vasodilator. So because of peripheral vasoconstriction, the total vascularity to your gingiva will be slowly decreasing and it will become ischemic. When it is decreased blood supply and oxygen is also reduced, automatically the anaerobic infection chances will be increasing. That is the reason in ANAG, we get ANAG is a mostly anaerobic caused by Borrelia vincenti. So that is a relationship between the smoking. But usually when we read in the textbooks, all these things will not be explained. You should understand that predisposing factors are, when they say diabetes, they say immune deficiency, smoking. The relationship between the smoking and ANAG you should analyze. And all of you, I think you know that diabetes also causes a lot of infections. And most of the students, they think that high blood sugar level in the blood is responsible for the infection. It has nothing to do with the sugar in the blood in diabetes which cause the infection. It is basically when you're diabetic, it is a collagen disorder, as well as you can see that the neutrophils will lose its chemotaxis. So because of lack of chemotaxis as well as decreased collagen disease, the blood vessels will become leaky, the chemotaxis, there is no attraction of neutrophils or lymphocytes to the site of infection. That leads to the infections most common in diabetes, not just because the blood sugar level is high. The diabetic patients basically have defective chemotactic effect. That is the reason for the delayed or infections or delayed wound healing in case of diabetic patients. Next question we'll see. All of you know that. What is it? Yeah, it's a hypertrophic scar or a keloid. Now the question here is very simple, and I think most of you might be having this question in your mind. why oral lesions heal without scarring whereas skin lesions do. And this is there in my BDS time also. I used to think where when you put a suture in the lower border of the lip, you'll get a scar. Just 1 millimeter inside in the lip, you don't get a scar. Why is that so? What is that 1 millimeter change or 1 millimeter change is going to cause so much change in getting scar tissue formation? What is the difference between skin and oral mucosa? The answer, oral mucosal fibroblasts are distinct cellular phenotypes when compared to skin, and oral fibroblasts have more MMP2s and less TIMs. For undergraduates, MMPs means matrix metalloproteases, which cleaves the collagen. TIMs are tissue inhibitors of matrix metalloproteases. Okay, so there are more destruction and less of inhibition. And another most important thing, oral mucosa heals with regeneration as seen in fetal healing. So that's why in fetus there will be no scarring, because the fibroblasts are different in fetus when compared to when your delivery, after delivery. So in oral mucosa alone, we have that kind of fibroblast as we have seen in fetal type. So that's the reason we don't get scarring. Okay, most of the times we don't get scarring. So my next question goes to, and I'm giving the links also below down. You can see these articles which have given all the reasonings for this. Just now I said the oral mucosal lesions will not show the scarring. But if you can see here very clearly, beautiful scarring, a line has been drawn. Then why this scarring has come? And what is this lesion is basically which shows scarring in the oral cavity? Cicatrial pemphigoid. The word cicatrial itself means scarring. So cicatrial pemphigoid heals with scarring, whereas other types do not. That is another question. If everything pemphigus is not causing scar, why cicatrial pemphigoid is causing scar? It is due to excessive presence of interleukin-4 in cicatrial pemphigoid. And interleukin-4 is capable of scarring process, and it has got pro-fibrotic role. So it causes more fibrosis. Only in cicatrial pemphigoid you have excess interleukin-4, and this is responsible for scarring. When compared to any other pemphigus or pemphigoid, only cicatrial will lead to that scarring in the oral cavity. This is a very simple and common thing which you see. Common cold, everybody knows. All of you know the virus which causes the common cold. Which virus? Yeah, it is the rhinovirus. Rhino means nose. In medical, rhino also means nose because it resembles, the nose is in front like rhinoceros. That is why it's called rhino. But my question here is, why only nose gets affected in common cold, whereas the other viral infection infects other parts of body too? If you see the common cold, it have only the nose which gets infected. You take chicken pox, whole body will get. Now you take corona, the body is getting affected. You take any virus, all the body parts are getting affected. But if you take a common cold, only the nose is getting affected. Somebody might be say you get red eyes and all, that is common flu. It is not cold. Flu is caused by influenza virus, not by rhinovirus. Rhinovirus causes common cold. And common cold is affecting only the nose but not other parts of the body. What is the reason? It is also a virus. Why it is not affecting other parts of the body? Anybody? Yeah. Simple answer. It is that the rhinovirus cannot survive beyond the temperature after the nose. It tries to penetrate after the nose, but the temperature should be the humid nature is the only, after that temperature, the body temperature rises and common cold virus cannot survive in that temperature. That is the reason it only affects the nose, but not the other parts of the body, because other parts of the body is not as wet as that of the nose, and it infects the epithelial cells of the nose, and after that it cannot penetrate. That is why you see only it is affecting the nose. Yeah, this is for the periodontologists who are there here, and those are interested in perio. And if you see that the gingiva is quite very hyperplastic. And why do anti-epileptic drugs cause gingival hyperplasia? Phenytoin, sodium, and all those things will cause gingival hyperplasia, all of us know. But the question here is, the phenytoin sodium, you are taking it orally. That means it is distributed into your body completely, and all part of your body in the blood, the drug is there. Why only the oral cavity fibroblasts are showing the proliferation? The other fibroblasts, the drug is drug. It is mixed in the body. It has entered into your blood circulation. So everywhere you should see this hyperplasia. Why only in the oral cavity? That is the question. Why gingival hyperplasia is seen in the oral cavity when the drug is taken systematically? Is it interesting? Have you thought of that any time? The answer is simple. There is no other place in the body where you have calicus. Oral cavity is the only place we have calyces. It causes continuous irritation to the fibroblast. Point number one. Point number two, it is visible to the external. If you smile, your gums can be seen. Even if somewhere there is an hyperplasia of your fibroblast, you cannot appreciate it because you cannot see that. When you smile, your oral cavity can be seen. So that is the reason you get gingival hyperplasia in anti-epileptic drugs. That doesn't mean there is no other way. The other parts is not getting hyperplastic. You cannot see. Number two, there is continuous irritation to your gingival because some sort of gingivitis will be there for everyone and some sort of calculus will be there. That is the reason you get gingival hyperplasia in anti-epileptic drugs. This is one of the important questions which they will ask you. Why only permanent first molars and central incisors are affected in congenital syphilis? Congenital syphilis, the deciduous teeth are not affected. The only permanent first molars and central incisors will get affected. You can see their beautiful mulberry molars and notch-shaped incisors. The other teeth are normal. Central incisors are what? Why only if it is a congenital, the deciduous teeth should get affected, but the permanent teeth are getting affected. What happens to deciduals? The answer is, by the time if the mother is crossed her first trimester, usually if she is infected and all, by the time the deciduous teeth have already been formed. So what happens is the deciduous teeth are spared and the permanent teeth will get affected. But the question here, the other thing is, why that mulberry shape? Because syphilis is a granulomatous disease. So you have a granuloma below the deciduous teeth and the permanent teeth is trying to erupt. So the indentations of the teeth of that granuloma, it is trying to will come onto the teeth surface. That's why you see in the incisor, it comes on the incisal edge, whereas in the posterior teeth, it gets occlusal edge. That's why you get that notch-shaped incisors, and this is because it's a granulomatous disease. And if at all the deciduous teeth gets affected, the patient will be aborted and fetus will be gone. And it is later if she get infected, then you get this kind of mulberry molars and Hutchinson teeth. Yeah, this question, why peripheral neuropathy is seen only in megaloblastic or pernicious anemia and not in other types of anemia? Because anemias are anemias, decreased blood supply or oxygen carrying capacity, but peripheral neuropathy is seen only in megaloblastic anemia and pernicious anemia, not in iron deficiency anemia or other types of anemia. The answer is, it is due to abnormal propionate metabolism. Propionate is required for myelin sheath, and all of you know the myelin sheath helps in conduction of electricity, and neuropathy is loss of electric conductivity. So that's why you get numbness and tinglingness. So without propionate, and vitamin B12 acts as a coenzyme for propionate metabolism. That is the reason you get this. You see the peripheral neuropathy in megaloblastic anemia, not in other types of anemia, because vitamin B12 is needed for myelin sheath formation. Now, this is my favorite. How many of you will accept that when you get jaundice, you should not eat, you should eat bland food without fats? majority of doctors, everybody feels that you should not eat fat when you have jaundice. It's a myth. I'm telling you, it's a myth. Because liver has got, because liver has got 32 functions, and you don't need to switch your bland night, because the nutrition what is required is being gone. Fat metabolism is only one mechanism out of 32 to 39 functions liver has got. Liver is not doing only fat metabolism. Please do remember it. Even the protein amino acids are formed in liver. Everything, all proteins, albumin, everything is formed in liver. So restricting fat is not necessary. The body with right nutrients will help the liver to heal faster. You can eat non-vegetarian food also, provided less masala, less spicy, because that irritates your liver, stomach or intestine, then you don't. If a patient is feeling like to eat the egg or the non-veg, you are supposed to give them with less masala and all. If at all you need to stop something in jaundice, it is alcohol. Somebody who is addicted to the alcohol should stop the jaundice. Alcohol in jaundice. But stopping fats is not necessary in case of jaundice. There are certain types of jaundice where the patient doesn't feel like to eat fat. When they try to take the fat, they try to vomit. In that case, you can stop. But most of the times I've seen patients will be thriving, asking for the food, but they say, you got jaundice, you're not supposed to eat fat. It is not right at all. You can see a hell lot of literatures are there on that. This concept of eating less fats during jaundice is not appropriate or right thing according to me. This is also one of the question which is there, pops up. All of you know that. Most of you would have gone, maybe not the present generation, but previously, most of you have got chicken pox. Why chicken pox is called chicken pox? We can call it as mutton pox or mother pox, but we are calling it as chicken pox. That means if a patient starts eating chicken, initially they thought it is due to eating chicken they got this pox. No, it's not due to that. Pox has got a meaning called pustule. Pox also means curse. And it has nothing to do with chicken. Actually, it has to do with this chickpeas. The lesions resembles chickpeas. And pox in olden days, when the etiology is not known, they thought that because of your sins you made in your past life, the God has cursed you with pox. Pox means curse in Greek, and pox also means pustule in Latin. You get pus out of it. That's why it is called pox. So chicken has nothing to do with, is actually chickpea pox. As you are pronouncing, it has become chicken pox. So chicken pox, nothing has to do with chicken. It is only the chickpea, the lesions resemble that. Measles. And what is the clinical feature in the oral cavity when you see measles? Is this white spots. And in examination, third BDS, they will ask you, what are Koplik spots? My question here is, why do you see Koplik spots in measles but not in other viral diseases? Of course, we see in German measles and this rubella and this one. What are the one? Why not in other viral lesions? Why only in measles we are seeing Koplik spots? Answer is that they affect the epidermal, the dermal cell, the epithelial cells, and there is perivascular inflammation also. Because of that, we see this ductal cells, ductal epithelial cells will get damaged, which are opening at that particular site. Particularly, we see in that particular opposite to the molars. So that is the reason we see Koplik spots in measles, but not in other viral infections. All of you know this pink bead colored one, bacteria. And what is this? Beautiful granuloma, and the nucleuses are arranged in a horseshoe shape. Yes, all of you got the point, I think. It is Langan-Jansen's. And these are all TB bacilli. Why only some infections will cause granulomas? There are so many bacteria in your body. In this, you have streptococci, we have staphylococci, but all those things are not causing granulomas. Why only tuberculosis, syphilis, these things are leprosy, these are causing granulomas? Why not other bacteria? Anybody has got an answer? Why not other bacteria, streptococci, staphylococci, which are most common, are not causing the granulomas? But TB, syphilis, leprosy, we call them as granulomatous diseases. The answer is simple. See, bacteria are extracellular pathogens. Viruses are intracellular pathogens. Majority of the bacteria are extracellular pathogens. And these things which I told, when I said about tuberculosis, leprosy, syphilis, they're all intracellular pathogens. Intracellular pathogens have got cell-mediated immune response, not humoral influence. When an antigen, any bacteria which is outside the cell, the immunoglobulins, circulating immunoglobulins will destroy them. But once the antigen enters inside the cell, the humoral immunity has got no role. It is only the cell-mediated immunity. So the T lymphocytes, all those things will come, and that is responsible for formation of the granulomas. The bacteria which are intracellular usually tries to form granulomas. The question here comes is next, all viruses are intracellular pathogens. Then why viruses are not causing granulomas? Viruses are intracellular pathogens, but they are not in the cytoplasm. They incorporate into the host DNA, they replicate, and they produce the copies. Whereas bacteria will not incorporate its DNA into host. That's why you get, this will be present as MHC, and T helper lymphocytes will give it to cytotoxic cells. That's how they form a granuloma formation. So somebody asks you, why do you see these as granulomas? Because these bacteria are intracellular, and here is the cell-mediated immunity. It is not humoral immunity. Majority of the bacteria, it is humoral immunity, but here it is cell-mediated immunity that is responsible for formation of granulomas. Fibrous dysplasia. When it is due to the mutation, why does not it present at the birth but commonly seen in the second decade? Fibrous dysplasia is due to mutation of GNANS1 gene. Everybody says that. We have studied in third BDS, but it has to be seen by the birth, but it is not been seen at the birth. Slowly the clinical features try to appear in the second decade. Why it is not seen congenitally? The moment it has taken place in the embryo stage, post-zygotic or pre-zygotic stage, it has to be seen in the, as soon as the baby is developed, was born, slowly within months, you should see the clinical features, but we are not seeing that. What could be the reason behind that? Or it can occur in the fetus, but the gene which has got mutated will be unmasked, and later on explaining its common occurrence in the second decade. That is why there is called a silencing. Gene silencing will take place. This gene silencing is responsible, though the mutation has taken place zygotic stage or post-zygotic stage, the clinical features are appearing at second because that is being silenced. The gene which is got mutated has been silenced, slowly it will appear. That is why we'll see in the second year. This is for pathologists who are there, and most of you know this, why you see the granular cell appearance, lysosomal insufficiency, aged component in the cytoplasm, increased apoptosis by phagocytosis and membrane cell, and increased mitochondria. These are the reasons for granular appearance. You say granular cell ameloblastoma, or you say anything else. The granular nature is due to all these things. This is one of the interesting things. Why do you have to know about so many ameloblastoma when treatment is same for the most? And the most often times in third BDS, as examiners, will ask you what are the histopathological types of ameloblastoma, and you will be asking follicular, plexiform, desmoplastic, granular, acanthomatous, all those types. And when we give the report to the surgeon, suppose if I have diagnosed it as follicular ameloblastoma, an ITC college pathologist have diagnosed as plexiform ameloblastoma, or some other college has diagnosed it as desmoplastic ameloblastoma. Will the surgeon have any different of opinion in treatment aspect? No. The treatment is same whether it is a follicular or a plexiform or acanthomatous or a desmoplastic. Then why do you want to read all these types of histopathology just to confuse the students or to ask the viva in the examinations? So that we have good number of questions in the examinations. Tell me the types of histopathology of ameloblastoma where the treatment is same for everything. Here, what you should understand is, I want to give an example. This is not for the surgeons or anybody. It is only for this type, histopathology types is only for the pathologist, for nobody else. I'll tell you example. Suppose there is a house. In that house, there is a thief. And the thief came and he has robbed everything in that house. Unfortunately, the lady who is lying in the bed, out of fear, she completely covered herself with the blanket, but she observed that that guy is looting all the gold. She was scared, so she didn't talk anything. That person looted everything house and she left. Next day morning, the police came and they started asking her how the person looks like. Then she is given a description. He is tall, good built and all those things. He has got a beard and hairy is very clumsy. After months or so, the same person came with a bald head, means he has shaved everything, removed his beard, and he has put some other things, makeup, and he looted that house again. The girl saw again, whatever is been left over was also taken. The police came. Like that, he has looted that house 6 times, but every time the girl is telling, I am seeing different thieves who are entering into my house. But actually, it is only one thief who is changing his face. So it is important for the pathologist that if I say this is ameloblastoma, it will not present you in the form of only follicles. It can present you in the form of plexiform. It can present you in the form of desmoplastic or granular or basal cell, but still you have to diagnose it as ameloblastoma. So it is for only the pathologist to know these different types of histopathologies for the diagnosis, so that we should not misdiagnose it. Nothing to do with the surgeon. So that is why initially I told precision and significance. There is no point in telling me and going to see the plexiform there is all this kind of things, and I can see the acanthomatous, the squamous metaplasia. All those things are not necessary for surgeon. Surgeon only needs, should I do a hemimandibulectomy or a marginal resection? Is it a unicystic or it is a normal general ameloblastoma? Please tell me that. That's fine for them. So we should not overburden ourselves to knowing all the histopathology. Those who want to do the pathology in future, they should know that ameloblastoma will come in front of you with different histopathology features. Can anybody tell me histopathology? Those who have seen the slide, this ducts patterns are all there. This is a classical aorta. Okay. And if you see the origin of this tumor, where do aorta come from? The same cell rest of Serrae, cell rest of Malassez, reduced enamel epithelium. Then one side we are getting an ameloblastoma from the same cells. The other side we are getting an aorta. And aorta does not cause any destruction or nothing, but ameloblastoma cause. Where the cells are the same. Why is that so? Why aorta is not causing the destruction like ameloblastoma when the origin of the cells are the same? Whether the cell rest of Serrae, cell rest of Malassez, or whatever, it's atom intermedium or intermediate cells or reduced enamel epithelium, but we don't see the destruction like ameloblastoma. And the reasons are here. The epithelium of aorta does not have direct contact with bone tissue. It is encapsulated. That is, if epithelium touches to the bone, then bone resorbs. That epithelium does not come and touch. It is well encapsulated. Number 2, Osteonectin. Osteonectin for other third BDS students. Osteonectin is for the helps in mineralization of the bone, helps in reactive bone. Osteonectin will be more in AOT. As it is secreting more osteonectin, there is a reactive bone formation, so there is less destruction. Number 3, biglycans helps in osteoclastic activation, helps in destruction. So there is a balance between pro and anti always in AOT. If it is lost, then only it leads to further destruction. Then we'll get a rare case report of AOT, which is showing a big, huge mass. Very rare. That is because when there is a balance lost between these osteoclastic and osteonectin balance is lost, then only we see the big tumors of these things. This is a favorite for all postgraduate students. The malignant transformation of oral submucous fibrosis leads to oral squamous cell carcinoma rather than fibrosarcoma, though it is a connective tissue disorder. Why? Most of the times this question has been asked. Oral submucous fibrosis is a connective tissue disorder. We should get a fibrosarcoma, but we often see squamous cell carcinoma. Why is that so? It's because the epithelium is being continuously stimulated by Arcanet, or the mutations takes place in the epithelium, whereas the fibroblast, there is no division. There is only excessive collagen formation. That excessive collagen is a defective collagen which cannot be degraded. There is no rapid multiplication. Multiplication is happening either in the epithelium, or epithelium is getting atrophy. So the direct insult, the patient will have a tobacco chewing habit. The carcinogenic agents will affect the epithelium, and epithelium shows dysplastic features and it infiltrates. The carcinogenic agents are not causing mutation in the fibroblast. It is arcoline which is causing mutation. Because of that, there is only the proliferation of the fibro. There is no high proliferation. It is only defective collagen which is secreted by this fibroblast. So there is no fibrosarcoma, though it is a connective tissue disorder. We see squamous cell carcinoma in oral submucous fibrosis. Multiple myeloma is a malignant idiopathism. All of you knows that, plasma cells. But if you see the clinical features, there is a neutropenia and lymphocytopenia. Question here is, when plasma cells are going in number, why should neutrophils and lymphocytes should go down? It is a disorder of a plasma cell. Let the plasma cells go up. Why should these things go on? Anybody has got an answer? As it is a malignant neoplasm, the plasma cells which are highly proliferating, immature plasma cells, they come out of the bone marrow and they start infiltrating into the bone marrow. So once they do that, so the bone marrow, what happens is these abnormal plasma cells, immature plasma cells, non-functional plasma cells are coming out of the bone marrow and they are re-infiltrating into the bone marrow. So basically, slowly what happens is the whole bone marrow is being deprived of these stem cells, and finally you don't have the neutrophils and other lymphocytes. So that's why you get neutropenia and lymphocytopenia, because it is a malignant neoplasm. This is adenoid cystic carcinoma, and we all say that adenoid cystic carcinoma and polymorphous low-grade adenocarcinoma, both of them has got perineural invasion. They invade the nerve tissue. Why only these two salivary gland tumors has got perineural invasion? Why mucoepidermoid carcinoma and other carcinoma, ethnic cell carcinoma has got less perineural invasion when compared to these two? Simple. These tumors will secrete neurotropism. Neurotropism means love or affinity. Neurotropic cells, cytokines. So that is the responsible. They have increased neural invasion when compared to other things. All of you can see that. It can be an osteoma. It can be a small fibroma, irritational fibroma. And all of you know that this is a well defined squamous cell carcinoma clinically, you can say that. The question here is, this is a benign tumor and this is a malignant tumor. Why this person has got benign tumor? Why this person has got a malignant tumor? You can say that this person has got tobacco habit. This person also has a tobacco habit. And there is no family history. This person has got squamous cell carcinoma. This person has got a fibroma, irritational fibroma, or a reactive lesion, or a benign tumor. Why God has cursed him with malignant tumor, only with benign tumor? Because this guy is good guy or this guy is a bad guy? Is that so? Why is that? What is the reason behind that? Why some people are getting benign tumors and others are getting malignant tumors? This is the answer is Knudsen hypothesis, which says that you have alleles. One gene come from father, one gene come from mother. If one gene gets mutated, even the other gene will be still functioning normal or suppressing the activity of this gene or slowing the activity of this gene. So you get a small proliferation of benign tumors. When both the gene, mother gene and father gene gets mutated, both the alleles get mutated, then you get a malignant tumors. If a single gene get mutated, you get a benign tumors. So that is called Knudsen hypothesis. That's why some people get benign, some will get malignant tumors. This is a favorite question because one of my third BDS student have asked me this in my class. Very interesting question. She asked me that, sir, why some lesions go as pedunculated and why some lesions grow as sessile? Are there any genes in the body which says that you grow as pedunculated or you go as sessile? Is that so? Who is telling them to grow as pedunculated? Who is telling them as sessile? Beautiful question a third BDS student has asked, which was really a good, interesting thing, which most of us will not think. We just say pedunculated growth, sessile, or verrucous growth and all those things. Is there any reason? See, where do you see pedunculated growths? If you see very clearly, the pedunculated growths are seen in hollow spaces. Nose, throat, oral cavity, sometimes intestine, where there is hollow space. See, if I want to grow, I need some support to grow. So if it is a hollow space, I'll stick here with my stalk and I start growing. When there is a hollow space, it is usually the pedunculated. And if something wants to grow in the bone, there is no need to stick our hand. It will be always sessile. You don't see much of a pedunculated growth intraosseously. It is always outside when there is a hollow space, like a hanging. You want to hang, you need to have a stalk. So you get it in the nasal polyps, you get throat, intestine. In the throat you get the polyps, and intestine you get polyps, oral cavity you get polyps. That's how. It is the only to grow, it is easy for it to have a stalk. Hollow spaces will have pedunculated, and these spaces will have, if there is no space, usually they will be sessile. Why certain tumors or lesions are pedunculated while others are sessile? So we say the conventional chemotherapeutic drugs fails to treating various cancers. The reason is that chemotherapy drug, any drug which is given, any rapidly dividing cell, it will kill. So cancer is also a rapid dividing cell. So it should kill all the cancer cells. Why it is not able to kill? Because the chemotherapeutic drug will kill all the dividing cancer cells, but there are some cells known as cancer stem cells in your body. These stem cells has got a property to eject the chemotherapeutic drug by ATP binding cassettes. What happens is, suppose this is a cell, if a chemotherapeutic drug enters into a cancer stem cells, it holds that drug, it will not allow it to go to DNA, it will emit it out with the ATP binding cassette. So the stem cells are not dying as such. Only the cells which are not stem cells are dividing, they are dying. The mother stem cell is keep on dividing. So that is why chemotherapy most of the times were not able to kill the cancer. Rarely, occasionally, they say that the chemotherapy has completely healed. In that case, that means that drug has penetrated the cancer stem cell and the whole mother cell is gone. You see the alien movies, you'll be killing as many of the aliens, but the mother alien will be lying somewhere down in the deep. Unless you hit that mother alien, it keeps on reproducing. You're only killing the daughters, but the mother alien is somewhere else. So you need to, same way in chemotherapy, the cancer stem cells are not being emulated because they have got an ATP binding site, which will in the cytoplasm, they catch out and they throw it out. So in conclusions for today's presentation, we have learned a lot of questions, answers, which pops up in our mind in the day-to-day clinical practice when you're studying books. Don't limit your knowledge only to the textbooks. Most often we try to mug up the things, the clinical features. We try to mug up. We don't ask why this, if you say this clinical feature is common, why that feature is common in that particular disease, why not in other diseases? You should start raising questions. You should start asking questions and try to find out the answer. Try to find out explanation for the clinical appearance of the disease. Then the subject will be interesting. To know that your basics should be good. That means your anatomy, physiology, biochemistry, patho, micro. If that basics are good, then you can able to explain the reasons. Find out the reasons for histopathological features observed. If you say the cells are rosettes, why rosettes are seen in this? Why not in others? Everything you need to put why, what, and how. So if you have any questions, you can always mail to me in your pathology, general pathology or oral pathology. I try to find out, I will be learning from the questions which my students will be asking, and it will be very interesting for us. So please do mail me, or in Facebook also you can send, ask me questions, anything which is, I'll be ready to do the justification as much I can. So I always dedicate my lectures to my great teachers, Dr. R. Vishwanathan sir, Dr. T.R. Saraswati, Dr. Ranganathan sir, and Dr. R.V. Subramaniam. These are the teachers with whom has taught me my undergraduate and postgraduates. All my knowledge which I've gained is all because of these great teachers. I always say hats off to them. Don't forget your teachers wherever you are. And acknowledgement my department staff. They are the big boon to me. They always support me. They give me a lot of time to prepare. They do my work. Because of them, I'm able to concentrate most of these presentations or conferences which I go upon. And they also give me the inputs. So thank you for, I acknowledge my department for that. Thank you all. Now this is open for the discussion. If anybody has got any doubts, you can ask me for 1 or 2 minutes, and later we can close this day. Is it okay, Saurabh?
Sir, yes, sir. Thank you, sir, for the wonderful presentation. I think all the undergraduate and postgraduate students have got many of the doubts cleared, sir, today. Many things which were there in the mind.
Saurabh,
Yes,
can
sir.
you hear me?
Yes, sir.
I would like to place on record the sincere thanks of the Department of Oral Pathology out at ITS for Dr. helping us in this webinar at short notice. Sir, it was a wonderful talk, very, very informative, and exactly what is the need of the hour for a young budding oral pathologist, a third year BDS student or a intern who right now is not being challenged enough to take a subject like oral pathology, which has tremendous scope. Why we, that is you and me, have taken. You have brought in a lot of insights in your presentation today, and I'm sure it would have motivated at least a few minds, if not all, to take up oral pathology as a subject with a lot of interest and vigor. Thank you so much for your presentation. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, sir. Those who are interested in detective or investigation, try to take oral pathology. There is a lot of investigation here. You need to find out why, what, how, who is the criminal, why is it happening like that. If those who are in detective interest, please do join oral pathology. It gives a lot of thrill.
Thank you.
So
thank you so much, Doctor.
Thank you, sir. Any students who have any doubts can ask 1 or 2.
Saurabh, you can ask them to unmute anybody who's got specific questions, or you can unmute.
Yes, sir.
I'm not sure about the topic.
If the students have any doubts, they can unmute themselves and ask. They can
or they can put it on ask on their behalf, either of the two.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, you can also do that.
You can put it in the chat and I'll read out the question.
Yeah.
I think few of them had asked before only, sir. Before the presentation had you had
Yeah,
asked.
one question which I got was like, does hypertension has got anything to do with the progression of oral cancer? Yeah, latest
Yes.
evidence. I will put a article also. A lot of articles are there on that. Yes, hypertension. If hypertension is there, there is increase in cancer progression. There is a relationship between hypertension. The patient is hypertensive, and the patient has got a cancer. Definitely, the cancer has got increased progression rate in hypertensive patients. And I can send you the article, Saurabh. You can give it to her. She can
Yes,
read
sir.
it on that.
That was by the PG student, sir.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
What were
So,
the questions asked by the students? You can just pass it on to him, Saurabh. You had said some students had some doubts.
yes, sir. I have already passed it
Already
on to him,
passed it, sir. Already passed
Okay.
it. I will send it all those things to you, Saurabh. You can just send it
Yes.
to them with the reference articles which has been said.
Yes, sir.
Other than that, anything else? Or we'll make it a day.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Please do give your feedbacks to Dr. Saurabh on this webinar, and that will be very useful for me for my future webinars, because I'm not used to webinar. Basically, I don't like to give much of, I want to be live to see the facial expressions and all, because body language is what is most important in understanding the subject. In these webinars, we cannot give much of a body language, only the voice modulation can be done. So, but in this corona pandemic, this is the only way we can go ahead.
Yes,
Okay.
sir. Sir, so, sir, I would, in the end, sir, I would thank you for this wonderful session, sir. And we are also thankful to the management of the ITS Education Group, our chairman, sir, vice chairman, sir, director, sir, and principal, sir, various departments, faculty members, for providing this platform to exchange knowledge, even in this during time of lockdown, sir. So,
No problem.
I would.
It
I
is
would
my
like to
pleasure.
thank
I
you
want
all,
to
sir.
thank the management and as well as the Devicharan sir for giving me this opportunity to speak to your undergraduates as well as postgraduates and few of the faculty members. Thank you, Devicharan sir, for giving me this opportunity.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir.
Okay, Saurabh. Shall we make it a
Thanks a
day?
lot, sir.
Can you
Yes,
please
sir.
send me
Thanks
the
a lot.
feedbacks and you just forward those
Yes,
feedbacks to me. Thank you.
yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Right. Thank you. Thank
Thanks
you,
a
sir.
lot, sir. Thanks a lot, sir. Thank you, everyone, for attending. Thank you.
Hmm?